as more of a mosaic rather than just a body of proof texts. Now, there are some serious obstacles. We've hit on these already. We've been trained to think, again, that Christianity is the right conduct for interpreting the Bible. We've been desensitized to the value, really, and theological importance of the unseen world. And we assume that a lot of things in the Bible are too odd or peripheral to matter. A story, I don't think I'll put this in the book. When I was in grad school, we were looking for a church. So there was a church real close to our house. Guy had a seminary degree from a well-known seminary, and I thought, hey, it would be a shame not to check this out. So we went for 2 weeks, and he really did a good job. It was very evident that he put time into the sermons, lots of material there, and it wasn't like, he didn't get up in his pulpit and start talking about the genitive case, in some Greek verb form. No, it wasn't ridiculous like that, but you could tell he'd spent time in the text and could ferret out some real nuggets. And I thought, this is great. This is really, I mean, I'm a grad student, so I try not to let these decisions fall to me, but I thought, no matter where my wife wants to go, I'd like to learn something every week. I'd like to be stimulated, put my studies aside, think about something that was in a classroom. This felt really good. We made the mistake of going back a third week. He was doing a series of Peter, 1 Peter. In the third week, he landed in 1 Peter 3, which is one of my favorite passages because it's so strange. This is the one where you get the flood of Noah, the angels that sin, the descent into Tartarus, somebody's already tracking, and Noah, and the flood.
Yeah.
Like, what in the world's all that doing in the same passage? And baptism. And I'm like, this is going to be great. So we get to church, and it's the only time I've ever seen this happen. He gets to the pulpit and looks at us and says, well, I know today's topic, today's passage is 1 Peter 3, but we're just going to skip this because it's just too strange. I'm like, did I just hear what I think? Did I actually see a pastor say that we're skipping this passage because it's just too weird? We didn't go back. I was appalled. I mean, at least take a shot at it. Do something with it. Throw a few slides up there with pictures or something. I mean, just do something with it. But it's like, no, we're going to skip this. That's what happens, maybe not as dramatically, with a lot of passages, especially in the Old Testament. There is nothing in Scripture that doesn't belong there. There is no passage that is totally random. There is no just, I need 4 verses. Okay, what should I throw in here? Oh, I got it. No, everything there is intentional. It plays a role. It contributes something to the writer's message. It would have been understood by the original readers and hearers, and they would have known how to process it and why it mattered. But some of those passages are just frankly strange. And they feel strange to us because we're modern. Because we are not predisposed to embracing the idea of an active spiritual world where the gods are real. They are real powers. They must be contended with, and they were. But they still must be. And they will be dealt with. Where Jacob, or some other biblical character, uses a method of divination that was taken seriously in his own time. Now, to Jacob, I think of the thing with the spotted goats and all that kind of stuff. That's what scholars call sympathetic magic. You do something to an object, put it near another object, and you think that it's going to have the same effect on that other object. God tells him to do that, and he does it. He obeys. He believes that it's kind of weird, but I'm going to do it. And God said he's going to do something from me. Okay? God says, you want to get rid of Laban, you want to take care of Laban, this is how we do it. In his mind, it's not connected with any false god. The power behind this thing is really the God of Israel. And the scripture tells us that. But nevertheless, this is what he does. I mean, I could literally go on for hours dancing through these weird passages. But what usually happens in our modern time is we either skip them, or when we get to them, we come up with some interpretation that strips the supernatural right out of that thing, that normalizes it for us, so that it doesn't frighten us, it doesn't confuse us. And what I'm trying to do in the book, it's just a sample, is I can't wait to hit those. Because then we get to think about some really neat stuff. I'm not going to avoid them, I'm looking for them. Because they matter. They contribute something. And they're really part of a bigger theological picture. Core concepts. Let's just jump in. I'm going to try to cover 4 tonight. It's really a challenge. The book's has 42 chapters. And I am tracing trajectories, again, from Genesis to Revelation through the 42 chapters. A lot of familiar stopping points, but often the way you get from one point to the other is going to feel completely new, and it's going to feel like a bumpy ride, and you're going to wonder, should I have gotten in the car? Yeah, just hang on. I'll get you there. I know where the destination is. I know we're going to drive through some tough neighborhoods, but I'll get you there. It'll be okay. So I'm going to try to pick out 4 things that are going to splinter off a little bit as we go through it. Divine counsel is one of them, and it's sort of fundamental. So let's start with that. How many of you have looked at this passage before in Hebrew? We have a winner. You're the next contestant. This was a watershed moment in my life that I do relate in the book. I was a graduate student in Wisconsin. It was my second year. I had a master's degree in ancient history from an Ivy League school. I'd been to 2 seminaries. I had taught undergraduate biblical studies for 5 years, and I had never read this in Hebrew. I've read it plenty of times in English. So one Sunday before church, I was talking with another guy in the Hebrew department. We were just killing some time before the sermon. And I don't know what the conversation was about, but I'll never forget the way it ended. He had his Hebrew Bible with him. He flipped it open to Psalm 82. And he said, you need to read the first verse of this. And so I did. This is the English translation, obviously. What we have here, God has taken his place in the divine council. We know that God here is Elohim. In Hebrew, this is Elohim Nitzav Ba'adat El. God, Elohim, takes his stand or stands in the council of El, or the divine council. And the second line, in the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. I don't know if you can really get the graphic here, but both of these terms, God here, G-O-D, and plural here, they're both Elohim. Elohim twice in the same verse. The first one is singular because of the grammar. Nitzav is a singular participle, so it is rightfully translated God, capital G-O-D. In the midst of the Elohim, the Kerev requires a plural translation. I looked at that and I thought, how could I have possibly missed that? How is it that I have never seen that before? I don't remember what the sermon was about at all. My mind was not in the sermon. This became something I had to resolve because why? It sounds like a pantheon. Just point blank. And I'm like, okay. What do I do with that? Now, eventually, this became the focus really of my graduate work, and eventually part of that goes into this book. Verse 6, you say, well, maybe we're talking about the Trinity there. Well, you don't want to read Psalm 82 with the Trinity in mind because in verses 2 to 5, God is taking the gods of the council to task for being corrupt. I would suggest to you that the Holy Spirit and Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, do not ever get spanked by God for being corrupt. That is not the solution to this passage. And in verse 6, you hit it again. God is speaking, I said you are gods, Elohim again, sons of the Most High, plural, all of you. Nevertheless, you're going to die like men. Die like humans do. I would also suggest to you that God would never sentence the Holy Spirit and Jesus to die like a man because they're corrupt. That's just bad theology. Okay? There's no other way to describe that. It's just bad theology. So the question is, well, what do you do with it? I mean, what in the world's going on here? And some, what I did initially was, it's like, grad school, I got classes, I got to think of a dissertation topic. Do I really want to get distracted with this? I just couldn't let it go. This needed resolution for lots of reasons. So I thought, well, surely somebody has addressed this in the evangelical world. I mean, sub-thought. I bet Jesus knew that passage. I mean, he did. He quotes it in John 10. I bet the apostles wouldn't be surprised like I am, sitting here like a dummy. I bet they'd come across that before. I bet they knew all about it. So how did they process it? They knew it was in their Bible. What did they do with it? I bet some scholar somewhere has tackled that. Not so much. The scholars that really went to town on this were critical scholars, because the predominant view in critical scholarship is that Israelite theology evolved from polytheism to monotheism. So this was just evidence of polytheism. Now, I wound up writing my dissertation against the consensus idea under a Jew who was, I can't call my advisor a secular Jew, but he wasn't like a charismatic evangelical Jew. He was kind of ambivalent. So I reject the idea. It just didn't make any sense for me for reasons I won't bother you with because it's my dissertation. But I thought, where are the evangelicals? Well, I'll tell you where the evangelicals are. The evangelicals are right where the rabbis were a century after the New Testament. Oh, these are just people. The gods of the council are people. They're Israelite judges. They're the elders of Israel from Exodus 18, even though those elders are never called Elohim if you actually read the passage. They're just people. Problem solved. Don't believe me? Read the notes on the new NIV study Bible that just came out a couple weeks ago. Nothing to see here. They're just people. The gods are people. Really? Well, what about Psalm 89? For who? Okay, here we have, let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. There's that council idea again. Oh, crud. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Hey, the council is not on earth. Maybe I missed something, but I don't know any passage that has a group of Jewish elders living in the skies that get to rule the nations and then are judged for being corrupt for it. Let me suggest to you that the human view of Psalm 82 goes nowhere except into absurdity. But you will see it everywhere in evangelical publications. It's getting better in the last 10 years. If you go up to the Net Bible, which is free online, it's a committee translation of the Bible, you'll read lots of good stuff on Psalm 82. It's not because I wrote the notes. It's because a friend of mine at Dallas Seminary wrote the notes. Okay, so there are, people are, venturing out of the woods, Old Testament scholars. They're saying, look, this is what the text says. So we need to think well about it because Jesus knew this passage. Apostles knew this passage. Lots of people knew this passage. Okay? There must be an answer. There it is. There it is. You get lots of references to the sons of God. Elsewhere, here's like a sampling. We're going to hit Deuteronomy 32:8 a little later. There's a reason that there's an asterisk with that one. It's in my mind, Psalm 82, I think Deuteronomy 32:8-9 is probably more important than even Psalm 82 for understanding the Old Testament worldview of what it is that they thought about their environment. We'll get to that in a moment. But these are all references to the sons of God as divine beings. Okay? We have references to the God of Israel among the gods or above the gods. Elohim or Elohim. Again, Deuteronomy 32:17, we'll hit a little bit later. Deuteronomy 32:17 is often messed up terribly in English translations. There are some good ones. NLT does a good job with it. ESV does not. ESV does a good job with Deuteronomy 32:8-9, which we'll see a little bit later. But it's like, how can we say that to the Israelite the gods weren't real when we have references to the God of Israel being above all gods? When the biblical writer says, hey, you gods out there, you guys stink, and you ought to be worshiping the true God. Hey, gods out there, you were created by our God. Our God is above you. You're, this kind of thing. Well, if they don't exist, think about that. Then what you have the biblical writer saying is, well, our God's better than Batman. Our God's better than Superman. Our God's better than fill in the blank with a fictional character. How does that lend any weight to your theology? How does that lend any weight to the theological statement? Hey, I'm better than Batman because I'm real. Okay, I'm better than a fictional character too. It makes the claim of the text of Scripture hollow and vacuous and frankly untrue. If they're people, our God's better than people. Oh boy, we can't consider that. Where's the uniqueness in that? And by the way, they're not people because they don't live in the clouds. People do not. This is not the Jetsons version of the Bible. Okay, we're not dwelling in the clouds here. But neither were they in the Old Testament. You say, well, what about the other statements that there's none besides me? We'll talk about Elohim in a moment. I want to throw this in. The key to this is really, what does Elohim mean and what does it not mean? And one of the initial objections is going to be, well, you can't, the biblical writer wouldn't have said this, even though it's like I'm reading it right there in the Bible. The biblical writer wouldn't have said what he just wrote because of these verses over here. There's none besides me. There's none like me. That kind of thing. And we assume that these are statements of non-existence, like God, the God of Israel is the only one that exists. And this is the way Christian tradition has taken these statements. What they really are is they are statements of incomparability. How do you know that? Well, you can do something boring, like read my dissertation, because I go through all the denial statements in the Old Testament and show where they show up in passages that affirm the existence of other gods. And that's a head scratcher. It's not a head scratcher if it means incomparability. Deuteronomy 32:12, Deuteronomy 32:29 have these statements in them. And as we'll see in a few minutes, Deuteronomy 32:8-9, Deuteronomy 32:17, point blank, affirm the existence of other Elohim. So how can you have the existence of Elohim in Deuteronomy 32, and yet also have statements like, there's none besides me, there's none else, that kind of thing? How can you do that? The answer is there's statements of incomparability. When God says about the other gods, there's none besides me, there's none like me, there's none else beside me who does X, Y, Z. He's saying, I am superior. The same phrase is shown in these two passages. You want to write them down or look at them at some point? You can't click out from here. Isaiah 47:8-10 and Zephaniah 2:15. In both cases, a city, Babylon and Nineveh, make the claim, there is none beside me. Now, if that language means the thing I'm comparing myself to doesn't exist, then what you have is you have two biblical statements where Babylon is saying, hey, there's no other cities in the world that exist, and Nineveh says the same thing. By the way, that would be diametrically opposed. And no, the point is not Babylon saying, hey, no other cities exist. Babylon saying, I'm the greatest. Nineveh saying, I'm incomparable. I'm the best. And that's what we have going on in the Old Testament. Where on one page you get affirmations of Elohim, and the other page you get these statements. Now, how do we resolve all this? What about monotheism? What does that mean? Here's the problem. Because we're modern, because of our traditions, and again, our traditions aren't like hopelessly wrong or anything like that, they're just modern. We've inherited certain ways of thinking about certain things in the Bible. Because of that, when we see the letters G, O, and D, G-O-D, when we see those letters, we mentally assign a specific set of attributes to those letters, to what they spell. And it's just a reflex. When we see G-O-D, we think of omnipotence, omniscience, sovereignty, foreknowledge, all this kind of stuff. We assign attributes to those letters, G-O-D, because that's what we're taught to do. And you can't put an S on the end of them, because, again, we're taught that only one being has those specific attributes. A biblical writer would not have thought about the word Elohim that way. A biblical writer would not have thought about Elohim the way we think of G-O-D. How do we know that? Because the biblical writer uses Elohim of half a different things. Okay, we have the Elohim of Israel, the God of Israel, whose name is 4 consonants. We have the gods of the divine council, Elohim, we saw that one. One Elohim refers to the one, God of Israel, the other Elohim refers to a bunch of other whatevers. So right there you got two different entities. The gods of various nations are called Elohim. Even the goddesses, by the way, are called Elohim. We don't get the feminine form. Deuteronomy 32:17, which most of your English translations will have as the demons are Elohim. The Hebrew word there is Shadim. The Shadim are Elohim. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Shadim are called Elohim in this passage. The disembodied human dead, 1 Samuel 28, this is the medium and Endor story. When Saul, of course, unbeknownst to the medium, says, hey, I want you to call Samuel for me because I need to have this conversation. Of course, he doesn't give her the details. But when she makes contact, she gets scared. Why? Because she figures out. Right, that's why she gets scared. She says, you're Saul.
You're Saul and you're calling on Samuel.
Right.
Yeah.
What she says in the text, in conjunction with that, is, I see an Elohim coming up out of the ground. And then she looks at him and, you're Saul. Why are you? You're going to kill me, right? I mean, she's thinking, because he's driven out all the mediums. Of course, he knows where to find this one. But she's like, this is Samuel, and that can only mean you're Saul, and I'm in trouble. And remember what Saul says, the first thing he says? She says, I see an Elohim coming up out of the ground, and she freaks out. And so Saul goes, what does he look like? And she describes him, and he's like, that's him. And they have a conversation. And what the Elohim tells him are things that came from the information that Samuel was given earlier when he was embodied about Saul, about other things. And Samuel says, again, you're going to die. Now leave me alone. I mean, that's my paraphrase, but that's basically how the conversation goes. You're talking to me, leave me alone. And that's what happens. In this passage, Genesis 35, Elohim occurs here with a plural verb form. So the question is there more than one that's being referred to in Genesis 35? And you can trace this back to a special angel, the Malach Adonai, angel of the Lord, gets referred to as an Elohim. Not only here, but elsewhere too. So there you've got a whole list of Elohim. Now here's the question. Would a biblical writer look at that list and say, oh, they're all equal? They're all equal in attributes. Because I can't, when I write, Aleph, Lamed, when I write the word Elohim, I'm assigning a set of attributes to that term. No. I would suggest to you an ancient Israelite would not think of their dear departed Aunt Rivka, who's in the afterlife. She's an Elohim now. We're not thinking of that Aunt Rivka has the same attributes and power as the God of Israel. That is absurd. The gods of the nations are not on par with the God of Israel. Shadim certainly aren't. So what does Elohim mean? Why do we get plural Elohim in Psalm 82? And an assortment of other verses. Elohim has nothing to do with attributes. That is not why you would use the term. A biblical writer would use the term Elohim to describe where a being properly comes from. If I call you an Elohim, that means you by nature are disembodied and live in the spiritual world. That is your address. Everyone over there is an Elohim. Everybody. Now, over there is rank. There is hierarchy. There is power. There's a wide distribution of different attributes. And only one Elohim is Yahweh of Israel. He is unique. An Israelite would say, if you were walking, if we go back a few thousand years and you ran into Abraham, and say, hey, Abraham, I've got a question for you.